Amanda Edwards grew up surrounded by the world of music, dance, and theater, spending her childhood in the studios of New Jersey Ballet. She studied dance, theater, choreography, and education, performing at venues like the Oriental Theater, Cleo Parker Robinson Dance, and the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. Along the way, her passion for the arts was matched by a growing interest in mental health, leading her to earn a Master's of Science in Counseling. She also became a certified yoga and meditation teacher, specializing in somatic and attachment healing. In 2020, Amanda found a new way to blend her love for performance with her expertise in trauma and somatic awareness. She stepped into the role of intimacy coordinator and soon helped pioneer the role of mental health coordinator, a position that now spans across scripted and unscripted projects, Broadway, operas, and student films. In an industry where trauma is often used as a story point, Amanda advocates for the mental well-being of creatives, crew, and of course, trauma survivors, who can be deeply affected by the challenging subjects they bring to life on screen and stage. Today, as the co-founder and president of the Association of Mental Health Coordinators, Amanda works to ensure mental health support is integrated into every aspect of creative work. This is True Crime in Hollywood, Amanda's personal tale. Listeners, I'm very excited for today's interview because this is a person who is ultimately changing the landscape of when it comes to ethics and storytelling on so many different types of genres. But obviously, Amanda, who is here today with me, we connected because I have a director friend who has already utilized their services with the Association of Mental Health Coordinators. And I know this is a term that most people are not going to be familiar with, but this is the reason that I'm bringing Amanda on today for us to have a conversation and talk about what those implications mean. But before that, I just want to quickly say hello to Amanda and welcome to True Crime in Hollywood.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining me. So, right off the bat, Amanda, I need to know what life was like for you growing up. What was your dream job, and how did you get here?
Oh my goodness, growing up. Okay. I was raised in the studios of New Jersey Ballet. That's how I entered the performing arts world at 2.5. My mother gave birth to my younger brother and told my father to take me with him to work. And
Wow.
at the time, he was the pianist, the accompanist for all of the classes at New Jersey
Wow.
Ballet Studio. And so little toddler Amanda got to either sleep through or participate in the classes at all levels at New Jersey Ballet, instead of putting me in childcare or me being a menace while my newborn baby brother was home with my mom. So that was my entry into the world of the entertainment industry, if you will.
Hmm.
Then in middle school, in 6th grade, I felt like I really needed a safe grown up to talk to, and I felt like I didn't have one. And so I decided in 6th grade I was going to grow up and be a counselor, so that there was never going to be any other 6th grader ever who didn't have a
Yeah.
safe grown up to talk to. In my child brain, I thought that if I became a therapist, then I would take care of all the 6th graders who needed a
Yeah.
safe grown up. And I didn't detour from that path. I went on to get my bachelor's in sociology and then my master's in counseling. And I have been a therapist now specializing in trauma for, let's say, 15 years.
Ooh.
And to mediate burnout, as one must as a clinician, I have continued to stay very much involved in the performing arts and the entertainment industry. That's been my creative outlet. And in 2020, I was in an acting class and was approached by a person about doing a project that had intimacy in it. And there were some red flags going on
Mhm.
there. And so I chatted with a male friend of mine who was in that acting class. And I was like, are these red flags or am I overreacting? And he said, no, those are definitely red flags. And
Mm.
if this person wants to do that project right, they should hire an intimacy coordinator. And P.S., knowing you, I think you'd be a really great intimacy coordinator. And being a Gemini with ADHD, it took me about 24 hours to sign up for all the classes that were being offered at the time and buy all the books
Wow.
that were available at the time and decide this was my path. It was like the
Yeah.
stars aligned and I felt that yes, this was where I was meant to be. It brought together my professional experience with my creative and play experience and my background in dance and movement choreography. And then I moved into mental health coordination from there as I saw the need. So that I guess that's a summation of where we started in the industry to where we are
Mm-hmm.
now.
100%. That is seriously so remarkable that all those pieces kind of just fell together organically for you and opened your eyes to what the possibility is in terms of having coordinators like yourself on a set. And equally, as a dancer myself, it just warms my heart to hear like that's your background as well. So love it. So with that being said, obviously you have this creative inside of you. So what types of entertainment are you consuming, and do you kind of watch these things by like ethical markers, if you will?
Yeah, I consume a wide variety of media and entertainment. I feel like both personally and professionally, it's my responsibility to be aware of what's out there right now, both in theatrical spaces like live theater and stage performance, as well as film, TV, documentary, docuseries, podcasts. I try to consume with limits, maybe with some boundaries for time and energy and focus reasons. But I do really try to have an eye and an ear for all that's going on in the industry right now, and absolutely have an awareness of which studios, which production companies are utilizing services that bring out more ethical practices and products that I know that I can feel really confident that cast and crews are being cared for. I love to see that when that's out there.
Yeah. And it's important that it's out there because these topics that are portrayed in art are very heavy, like a good token of these, projects. And so that's where, as I mentioned, you were introduced to me, or I guess I should say the Association of Mental Health Coordinators, again, like I mentioned, by another director, Grace McNally, who ultimately, came to me after I started the Producing with Empathy workshop that I begun. And the reason for that was because just as I had shared with you and my listeners, there was a project that I did this past year that ultimately left me really wanting to make a change in this industry. And you've hit on that so eloquently and doing so in a way where my brain hasn't been able to, put all of these things together. So then when I heard about the association, it was like just, oh my gosh, it's actually here. It's happening. It's already, begun. And then I sit down with you for the first time, and it was like poetic justice, just sitting there listening to you, coming to you as a true crime producer and filmmaker and podcast host. This is where this podcast came to be because when we're talking about true crime, whether it be, a narrative film or, unscripted, we're talking about the most horrific things that people could ever go through in their life. So, can you talk to me a little bit about what your overall thoughts are regarding the true crime entertainment industry, and equally how you are seeing that something like this, having a mental health coordinator on set, would be beneficial to projects like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that historically, true crime and documentaries around crime stories have seen this drive to do the gotcha, to
Mhm.
get the big, raw, emotional overwhelm for both the person who's being interviewed, the participant, but also for the audience.
Mhm.
And I think we know enough now to know that, first of all, that's not necessary. And second of all, that's not actually the most effective way of supporting someone to tell their story, and not the most supportive way of supporting or having an audience member consume a
Mhm.
story. And for example, I worked with on an unscripted show that featured a woman who had been on a true crime series previously. And she confided in me that she was so grateful that I was present for this experience that she was having, because on the last project that she had agreed to participate in, they hadn't told her in advance that they had plans to show her pictures of the crime scene.
Wow.
And in that interview, and feeling forced to look at these photos of herself, of the other person involved, of the tragedy that was in that moment, and then for her, the moments after that moment,
Yes.
that was so disruptive for her, for lack of a better word,
Mhm.
and set her back in terms of her healing experience. And it was completely unnecessary for them to do. But then knowing that I was there on that next project, she said was the only reason that she signed on to do that project, because
Mhm.
she believed that her mental health and safety would be protected throughout filming of that. I think it's our duty as an industry to not only protect as much as possible the people who already have lived through some
Yes.
of the most horrific things, but
Mhm.
also the people who are watching at home after,
Mhm.
and also the crew members who are present for these interviews, for this storytelling, and the editors who work in post, who are putting all that material together after the fact, and
Yes.
having to witness that sometimes all by themselves in studios for
Yeah.
10, 12, 15 hours at a time without sunlight or another living human in the
Hmm.
space.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm incredibly grateful when I'm brought on for a project, and I get to feel as though I'm having an impact of safeguarding as much as I possibly can as one human, so
Hmm.
that everyone involved in the process can still tell their story and still experience the emotional ride that goes with that, and to gain the information and the perspective that is sometimes the reason that we're telling these stories in the first place, and also to do so in an ethical way, that where we are reducing the risk of harm to everyone involved.
Hmm. I just wish everybody in the industry could understand what you just said because, like I said, speaking with you for the first time, it was so eye-opening. And the things that I know today that I wish I would have known last year around this time would have made a drastic difference in terms of the product that ultimately is now out. I'm gonna have no problem speaking out about this project that I was a producer on. This project was literally greenlit the morning that I began, and like got that call hours later to start on that Monday. And as one could imagine, being pitched a documentary series about survivors, what survivor that knows who I am wouldn't realize how happy and excited I was and honored to be a part of something that could have been so groundbreaking for so many cult survivors, which is a new interest, if you will, when it comes to the entertainment industry and the salaciousness that comes with cults, right? Like cults is such a scary word when we really think about it. But when you stop and you sit down and you think about what types of crimes have been committed against these people, some of these people were born into the cult, meaning they were then turned into child brides, being given to these leaders by their parents. Okay, we're talking about some of the most severe traumatic experiences. So when I got into this role and started trying to figure out what this project was, I don't know how many times I had to repeat myself that you cannot produce this show as a murder show. And why is that? Because you have living, breathing survivors who are dealing with it every single day of their lives. It lives in their bodies. There's not a day that goes by that they don't think about these things. Their body is the crime scene. It gets taken with them everywhere they go. So when I was doing this show and producing this show, I had the survivors in the forefront the entire time in my brain. And so to this day, I have yet been so excited for a project to be released to then the next day regretting everything that I had just done
Mhm.
because my survivors were not respected, were not treated with care, and treated in a way that really puts them back, just like you said. They are now re-traumatized. They are now re-victimized, let alone having to grapple this by themselves with their families, with, again, just being able to sit by themselves and have that moment to really think back of everything that just happened to them. So it should go without saying that having someone like Amanda on a set, speaking to crew, speaking producers before, a project even begins, I think, because this is a process too, a process of consent that should be done throughout the entire project, in my personal opinion. Because things like this, just as you said, you have these safety guards. We're going to get into like the nuances of really what it means to be a mental health coordinator. And with that being said, though, you talked about all the different people that this affects, and it's not just one isolated scenario. But when I see, the higher level producers are not having the same responses as me or the same reactions as my editors, there's a problem. There's an disassociation with what they're actually creating, right? And so that's why this podcast exists. So with that being said, can you break down a little bit more of what your role is and maybe give the example if you were to go on an unscripted set, what does that look like and what are you trained to do and in preparation for ensuring that it's a safe set, and keeping that survivor in the forefront?
Absolutely. I want to highlight, and I haven't seen the docuseries that was just released,
Right.
and I'm gleaning from what you're sharing with me that essentially the what is very important when we're telling survivor stories is that we are treating the survivors as though they are the subject of the story. So if we are shifting our focus and shifting the audience's focus to the story of a murder,
Mhm.
then these survivors are no longer the subject, they are an object in
Yes.
the story.
Yes.
And that symbolically, somatically, metaphorically, for both audience consumption and for the individuals participating in the creation of the project, that is in some ways reliving, re-experiencing that trauma, especially
Mhm.
for people who are born into a cult because, and especially people assigned female at birth, in
Yes.
cults traditionally are treated as objects. They're
Mhm.
not the subject. They're not the main character of their own story. They're not, they don't perceive themselves and are not perceived by others as a human with rights.
Mhm.
And so to experience the opportunity to be the subject of something and then to see it play out
Mhm.
as storytelling where the subject is something else and you are yet again just an object in
Mhm.
someone else's story could absolutely be harmful. So my heart to those women and to you really and that is part of when I'm working with a production company who is open to
Mhm.
information and feedback and wanting to do better in this industry. Those conversations are part of pre-production meetings where we're
Yes.
talking about what is the goal of this project? What is the story that they're trying to tell? And how do they want to tell that story? What are they hoping to leave audiences with? What are they hoping is the outcome for the participants? How do they want this piece to change the world in
Mhm.
some way, right? I
Mhm.
think many creatives, many producers, people in positions of power who are creating these things, they have a vision of an impact of some kind.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're led astray by sensationalism or by pushing the envelope.
Mhm.
Um, and they lose sight of the primary intention and recognizing that just because you have a good intention doesn't mean the impact is good. And
Yep.
we need to have a vision for both of those things so that they're in alignment, in integrity as much as is possible in this industry. I mean, that's a hard thing to do, but
Mhm.
doing due diligence in pre-production and having those conversations around what will the interview style look like, how are we educating producers and crew members about the situation that these people have survived in advance. What protections can we put in place for the people behind the scenes, as well as how can we prep the people who are in front of the camera, some of them for the first time in their lives, and having
Yes.
no experience or background in the industry,
Mhm.
not having foresight or even forethought about any backlash after the fact and how it will affect their lives and the ripple effect of being in something like this.
Mhm.
So that's a lot done in pre-production. In terms of in the moment and on set, I am there when I'm in the role of mental health coordinator. I'm there as a mental health resource
Mm.
for everyone and anyone who is a part of the production. So I bring with me my Mary Poppins bag of fidgets and mints and sour candy and coloring books and all of the soothing, calming tools, as well as my own very well regulated nervous system
Yeah.
and therapeutic experience where I
Mhm.
get to be the tool to support a sense of safety and a sense of peace in a space where violence is often the topic that's being discussed. So we can access a felt sense of safety while we are talking about things that were unsafe if
Mhm.
we work as a team to really cultivate a space that is predictable, that is consent forward, that is really aware of people's capacity and respectful of boundaries. And all of that is me advocating for those things and then a production going, yes, that sounds great. Let's make this project really impactful and also let's do it ethically. So I love when that
Mhm.
happens.
Mhm.
In post production after the fact, sometimes productions will ask me to look at final edits and provide thoughts or feedback on things. Sometimes participants ask for and require some debriefing meetings and
Mhm.
support to process the experience of being interviewed and move forward with their lives. Sometimes I'm meeting with people about how they're going to handle telling their families
Yeah.
about what's going to be airing on stuff. I mean, there's a lot of wraparound support that goes into all stages of production. And I just try to be as available and as resourceful as possible in any way a production will allow me, trying
Mhm.
to be as easy as possible to work with, not getting in the way, and also being a strong advocate where I am permitted to be. It's a
Yeah.
delicate balance of all of those things.
Mm. Well, thank you. Thank you for everything that you are doing and what you're spearheading because it's no secret. It's needed, right? Everything that you just said is everything that I tried like intentionally to do on this series, which I was very much very vocal among other producers about me being in the field, specifically for one particular episode, and that is strictly because of the things that you just said, that I knew the mental health aspect of this for them to open up that Pandora's box of trauma is going to bring new things. And what I even said to this production company was something you have to understand is that as a trauma survivor, myself included, so I definitely made it aware I was a survivor myself. And I said, when you start telling your story, not only are you re-traumatizing yourself, you're opening this box. And repressed memories can come at any given point in time. And guess what happens then? Either it could completely disrupt my remaining train of thought and not be able to finish the interview. It may elicit a anxiety or panic attack. So I try to make them aware of all of these things. And it was kind of like, okay, that's cool. We got it. But it had to keep being brought up again and again and again and again. And as I shared with you, yes, I shut down a whole day because my survivor had a panic attack. And I removed them safely from set to bring them back to baseline. I have not gone through the training or any certificates that is done by y'all. However, I am signed up for my first core.
Yay.
To make sure that I have the toolbox with me next time, that I have an understanding how to advocate properly for these people, because it is a responsibility when I am the producer who is ultimately creating the whole series for these production companies. When, again, something like a Survivor Forward piece like this, what's the main topic? That survivor, right? So who better to go out and try to connect with these people? And that's the other part, that production, that people don't understand, is that the survivors you're seeing on TV are not the only ones I connected with. The amount of survivors that I met from cults all across the United States would shock people. And I kept hearing the same themes, the same concerns, the same types of traumas. And I knew that my responsibility changed that minute, because not only am I advocating for the ones that actually make it to the series, but to the ones behind the scenes as well. And I take great pride in my work. And this is the first time that, yeah, y'all, I will not be promoting the series, period, because of the horrible things that happen. So, now, to flip on the side of that, I want to talk about, when we're looking at these ethical stories in play, because the other side of true crime is the scripted side, which I would also argue is just as re-traumatizing, re-victimizing, especially when there is no knowledge or consent by any of the parties being depicted. Another major issue. So, how do you feel that in the space of scripted projects, how are coordinators being used in this aspect?
That is very similar to how I'm brought on for narrative work in general.
Mhm.
And that is very similar in terms of pre-production, where I meet typically with the creative team, producers, directors, anyone else who's at that higher level with the creative vision of what the project should look like and what their vision is for it. And we talk through how they plan on depicting these stories. What are the money shots that they're hoping for?
Yeah.
What do they want to see? What are and I review a script, and I'll look at how specific are we being with some of these moments. I give a lot of education in terms of the contagion effect and prescriptive behaviors
Mm-hmm.
that potentially could put audience members at risk if they are watching those things happen on a screen. And then we also talk about logistical things, like
Mm-hmm.
how could things be scheduled in a way that feels better for performers involved? Are there any pre-existing concerns with mental health for cast or crew members? Does production know of any lived experience that it could be mirrored in the project? And that gives me a heads up to what I'm walking into.
Mm-hmm.
I then meet with the performers, and this is where my work is similar to intimacy work, in that we have a pre-production meeting to talk through what the expectations are for that scene. What's the movement going to look like? What might the breath look like? What are the vocalizations going to be? How are we collaborating with stunts if that is something that's involved that day? And then that performer has the opportunity to share with me in that very private space if they do share lived experience with what is being depicted and what
Wow.
strategies work for them for
Yeah.
taking care of themselves when they're navigating content like this. Or if they don't have any strategies, then we get to brainstorm that together and put together sort of a safety plan for them so that when we show up to capture the material on the day, they feel more confident in their ability to really give a great performance. They're not sidetracked by worries, what happens if, because they already know what happens if they have a panic attack or a flashback, or what they know that I'm right there and we already have a plan for what happens if. So we often get far better performances from
Yes.
people who feel safe to
Mm-hmm.
lean in to the emotional vulnerability and rawness of playing these characters who, aren't characters at all. They're a reflection of real people.
Yeah.
And then optional production usually will send out my contact information to all the crew members. And then I offer, again, optional meetings with any crew member who is concerned for their own mental health and well-being as part of the project or just in this phase of life. Sometimes people are struggling to get to work for reasons that aren't what's happening on set. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy to have meetings with people to troubleshoot how can we improve whatever it is so that they're better able to manage the demands of this really specific, awesome, awful, fascinating, fantastic job that we
Mm-hmm.
have in this bizarre world of entertainment that we live in, right?
Yeah.
And then after we've captured that material, then I'm working in post with whoever needs support. And sometimes that is a crew member who didn't think they had any issues or concerns. And then they're realizing that they're waking up with nightmares of what they witnessed take after
Yeah.
take after take of, and need to debrief about that. Or they need a referral for some ongoing support because something has come up for them. Or I'm working with editors at how to create some boundaries for themselves so that they're able to continue working on a project that depicts some really terrible stuff going on. Yeah, so it's very similar to scripted narrative,
Mm-hmm.
fictional stories. There's an added component in those stories, specifically of a content note, oftentimes, which many times productions will ask for my input for the content note that you see airing at the beginning of the episode or the beginning of the
Amazing.
film, whatever it is. And then also gathering resources. So at the end of the series or at the end of the show, there's often, if you or someone you know is affected
Yes.
by, then there's the website. So cultivating those resources that feel like responsible referrals for
Mhm.
people. Sometimes I'm supportive in that. And then also the content notes that go out to crew members and cast members with the call sheets.
Mm.
Because not all crew members will read the
Yeah.
sides for the day. Not all crew
Oh, I'm
members are
aware.
prepared when they
Yeah.
show up on set for the day. And
Mhm.
so I advocate for production to provide those content notes on those call sheet emails so
Wow.
that crew members know what they're walking into, at least the theme of
Yeah.
what they're walking into on set that day. And they have my contact information readily available so that they're not hunting me down on set if they need something right away. So
Oh,
it's a lot. I feel like that was a lot of and it is, but
it's all needed.
I'm not doing all of those things for every project because not every production company wants all of those things. We're
Right.
still very much in a stage of this work where I'm just so grateful to be in the space. I'm grateful that there are production companies who see a need, even if it is just one of those 27 things that I just
Yeah.
listed. I'm better is better. And I am so grateful to be included in any capacity. And
Yeah.
also, production companies can get more of their money's worth if they
Yeah.
utilize me doing all of those things, if they're open to it.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, and like you said, it's still, you're in your infancy in terms of like really getting this to where it needs to be. So, this is why I wanted you on the podcast because I want production companies to know. And obviously, being in the true crime genre, it is so important because, same thing, like I said, scripted can do the exact same, things to these survivors as well, especially high profile cases and the cases that we see, projects being built upon so many times through so many different decades. And so, these people do still exist. People are still alive. And so I just love that you are creating this safeguard, not just for, cast and crew, but you're also thinking about the audience. So I want to shift a little bit to talk about audience because again, as a survivor myself, I always appreciate a note before I watch a project to just mentally prepare myself. The new White Lotus just premiered last weekend and oh boy, I
I
so
haven't watched it
wish.
yet.
All I'm gonna say is that I wish there was something to, especially for Americans who gun violence is very prevalent in this country. To not stop and think for 2 seconds to issue a trigger warning for gunfire, sounds of rapid gunfire, is extremely irresponsible. I'm not even a gun violence survivor, but the trigger of that in me got the best of me for the rest of that episode. So it goes without saying, it's not just rape scenes, it's not just sexual assault scenes. We're talking about all of it.
Yeah.
All of it, and I did appreciate again for this cult survivor series, they did put up resources at the end. But once again, it really helps when it's at the beginning too. Because as a consumer, I can opt and say, you know what? I'm not in the space for that this morning. Or I'm gonna do that when I'm in a better space, right? You give that autonomy back to your audience. And that's
Yes.
where this respect factor goes a long way. So just as you said, collaboration, having these conversations, and I know this as a creative myself as well, is that I'm going to get such a more fruitful and richful story and end product if that collaboration exists.
Mhm.
Especially when we're talking about, again, like scripted series that depict these horrible, horrific crimes, which we have seen time and time again already, with American Horror Story depicting gun violence, depicting mass shootings. We have very vivid rape scenes in scripted projects, that I have seen before that are just, they hit so close to home. And I always think about those actors. How do you walk away from your day, offset when you just had to do that, let alone knowing if they're a trauma survivor themselves or know someone close to them who have, gone through something like this. It's maddening to me that we're just barely having this conversation now in society. And I think now more than ever, given the state of our country, we need to be a lot more mindful of each other. You said something earlier that, crime scene photos, certain things do not need to be shown to make an impactful project. I want to unpack that a little bit because, again, I'm somebody who's no stranger to crime scene photos, but I have been very much made aware of family members who, maybe were even consulting producers on projects, and this information wasn't provided, that crime scene photos would be shown. Regardless if you blur things out or not, a crime scene photo is a crime scene photo and is so damaging. So, when we're talking about editors and we're talking about producers who obtain these documents, once again, where's the safeguard? That was a part of my producing with empathy of we need to be labeling documents. We need to be labeling folders. The fact that like I'm even having to say that, was like again maddening because an editor explicitly said, "Hey, I didn't realize all of this was going to be said in this interview. I had to shut off for the night, so I didn't touch, work until da 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 time." That's when I was like, game over, game over. you know so talking about that, because we are starting to see more independent films, more independent projects that are doing these things, that aren't showing recreations, they are not showing crime scene photos. So in your personal opinion, if you were to be met with a production company that was insistent that you had to use crime scene photos, what types of things like would you say to them?
I feel like we can give immense gratitude to the intimacy professional movement
Yeah.
for our even our awareness of consent and our mental capacity to now see that working in the entertainment industry as a creative doesn't mean that you shouldn't be consenting to the work that you're doing. I think we have been
Yeah.
conditioned over so many generations to just be yes, and I'm grateful to be here, whatever you say, I'll do the work. I feeling very much easily replaceable. And so we just have to say yes to whatever the project is and not have a problem with anything and everything that goes on. And I really feel like it was the early folks in the intimacy movement in the field that pushed forward that everyone should be consenting to the work that they are doing when they show up to work, which sounds so ridiculous to say right now. Of
Yeah.
course, people have
Right.
the right to consent to the work that they're doing when they show up to work.
Mhm.
Um, and I feel like this is where that conversation lives. When we're talking about a producer or a production company who is saying, this is the type of documentary that we want to do, this is the type of true crime story that we want to tell, and this is how we want to tell it, then the participants should be front loaded with that information of this is the plan, and then asked, how does that feel for you?
Mhm.
And if the participants are on board with it and it feels, and it sometimes can feel empowering, it can feel like reclaiming themselves or their story.
Yes.
There can be so many potential positives to those big, vulnerable, sometimes scary shares, like the crime scene photos, like the gory parts of the story, like having the interview questions be really hitting deep and hard, that can be an incredibly healing experience for participants if they're walking into it providing informed, embodied, reversible consent that was not coerced by
Hmm.
anyone, that is specific so they understand exactly what to expect, and that they feel as though if in the moment they need support or they have changed their mind, that that is okay, and that they can feel safe to do so. And I have seen plenty of projects be very graphic and very explicit, and the participants feel incredible about going through that experience.
Hmm.
And of course, we have numerous examples of it going the other direction. So I think it really boils down to everyone consenting to the work, whatever the work is going to be that day.
Yeah. And consent is so important. And I think you touched on this, but like consent from the moment that they say, yes, I want to participate all the way through. Because most production companies just assume, oh, okay, they said yes here, it's a free for all. And we
Yeah.
can depict them whichever way they want to, which is so wrong, which, like I said, that is officially the last time I do a freelance show like that without a production company that I'm made aware of. Uh, you know, again, like knowing showrunner, all of it, because that stuff goes out the window. And I think on top of the consent factor, we also have to think about what that is after the project's out. Because I have heard both ways, right? Like I have had people say, oh, I had this whole thing in my mind of what I envisioned, and then I see the end product, and this is not what my family signed up for, or that is not what I said I wanted in there. Because most people also realize they don't get to see the final cut. They don't get those opportunities to be able to screen it to advocate for themselves. And I understand that more than most people, but it still doesn't make it right. It still does not make that right. And I'm a firm believer that honestly they should and they should have that autonomy over their own stories because it's their stories. So the other last part I will say about consent, though, is when we are talking about, again, you're having a trauma survivor sit in a chair in a room of people they don't know with lights and a bunch of cameras all over them. They are bound to say something that they probably didn't actually want to say, or they phrased it in a way that, maybe implies something else. All of those tidbits need to be taken into consideration. Um, and then you have, like I said, I've given so many Ryan Murphy examples because that's the best one for me to give the example of, and it's because I've already had people on this podcast talk about what he has done, in terms of doing these projects that they did not consent to. And people will hear before this episode, Callahan, Walsh, and I, we're talking about this from the greatest, biggest family in true crime when we're talking about the Walsh family. So this isn't something that I am just by myself screaming, that I want the entertainment industry to listen because we have intelligent, very professional people like yourself who have studied these things and we need that amplification. And so any trauma survivor that is listening, I hope you know that. I hope you know that you are allowed to have consent at any given point in time in these projects. I think it's also important for people who are starting to contact me, other production companies and directors wanting to come on this podcast to talk about their project and raise awareness. And as much as I love, 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 love the enthusiasm, guess who I have to go through first? The people that you are depicting in it. And I will find out if they are consenting parties. I will find out if they want you speaking on their behalf. And I will find out if they are happy with the end product. So that's just a PSA for anybody who's gonna try to
Yeah, love it.
reach out to me. Because like I said, I'm not picking just anybody to come on this podcast. It's people that I honestly can vet through, listen to them. This is why I conduct pre-interviews. We have extensive conversations because I take this very, very seriously. So I appreciate everything that you shared. So one of the last questions I do have for you before we get into some fun ones, I just would love for you to share your, you know, I guess advice for trauma survivors who may be, approached by production companies, but on the flip side, also what you would share to production companies who are interested in doing a true crime story and what safeguards or things they should be mindful of from the jump.
I think as much as I can, encourage people to bring on, if not a mental health coordinator, then at least a consultant of some kind to bring awareness to potential for betrayal, potential for revocation of consent, potential for harm in the work. I at a minimum, it feels like bringing on someone whose job it is to have that unique awareness and perspective, and someone who isn't in a coercive position of power. Producers have a lot of power, directors have a lot of power,
Yeah.
and participants, when they are confronted by a person in a position of power, will often revert to however they managed to survive the trauma that
Yes.
they experienced. And that's exactly what we don't want to happen.
Mhm.
And so for people who are being approached about this work, I would encourage asking if there is a mental health coordinator plan to be a part of production, or some other type of trauma consultant or therapeutic support of some kind. If that is a plan
Mhm.
that is already in place or will be in place and used as a resource throughout. I also, for participants, would, and maybe it's Googleable, I don't know, but I feel like there's got to be some, and maybe this is something that we should collaborate on, actually, a list of questions for participants to be asking productions when
Yes.
they are approached. What
Mhm.
what rights do I have to my
Mhm.
story once you have it? Can I see the final cut? Do I get approval in any way on
Mhm.
what is released out there? Do I have a say on if there is a content note, and what resources are going to be made available, and really asking the questions that production historically have not been forthcoming with
Yes.
that
Yep.
information from the get-go when someone is signing on to a project. And on the flip side of that, for productions, I would encourage being as forthcoming as possible with the intention and with the limits for
Mhm.
participants. Because, like I said, there's nothing inherently wrong with wanting your project to be really graphic, having a lot of shock value. There's nothing that is necessarily damning about operating that way, as long as everyone involved is consenting and understanding with all of the information that
Mhm.
that is what they're signing on to. And even the rights to the story. If a production is very straightforward and telling participants that we're going to take your story and you don't get a say in what footage we use and when and how, and you signing this is releasing control over any of how we depict the final product,
Mhm.
that's not inherently bad. If someone, a participant, is like, that's fine, I don't care. Like,
Yeah.
I just want to tell my story in front of a camera. I don't care what version of it comes out to who.
Mhm.
Fine. There's no
Mhm.
judgment around any of that, as long as it is fully informed from the start of the
Yeah.
project.
Yeah. 100%. Thank you. Thank you for sharing all of that. And I would be absolutely interested in collaborating on something like that because
Yeah,
I
let's
do
do it.
think it is important. Yeah, that people understand what rights they have and what they should be able to ask for. So, what am like officially last question, I would love for you to talk to me more about the association, especially with so many different producers and crew and people listening to this. If they are interested in getting certified, where can they go? So, this is your full plug. Plug away.
Okay. Well, the Association of Mental Health Coordinators is largely a training organization that we do community outreach and raising awareness. We offer a variety of trainings depending upon what people's goals are. So we do mental health first aid specifically for the entertainment industry, and that's the National Council of Wellbeing certification that we have added material to so that it isn't just, if your neighbor is going through a mental health thing, what do you do? We add
Yeah.
on specifically to when you work in entertainment, here are some of the challenges in terms of mental health that you might face, and here are some strategies for navigating those. So that's offered multiple times a year. And then our custom trainings are not just for people who want to be mental health coordinators. Our core workshops, which happen over the course of 3 days, are about psychological safety. You get to dip your toe into some polyvagal theory and kind of nerd out with me a little bit with some
Yay.
neuroscience. We learn about navigating conflict and
Mm.
not only engaging in conflict yourself, but also how to facilitate conflict conversations and navigating conflict with people. Also, in that core curriculum, we go over what are access needs and
Mm.
how can we support our workplaces to be more accessible for all of the people who show up on the day. So those are some just very much core skills that anyone can benefit from if you want to be just better in terms of how you show up for the mental health and safety of the people that you work with. And that's both stage and screen and academia. It's really across the board in the entertainment world. And then from there, after people have completed core, if they want to go a bit deeper, we offer a foundations level course, which is 6 weeks long. And that's where people are learning some more of the therapeutic tools that we use as mental health coordinators. Just because you take this foundations level course doesn't mean you want to be a mental health coordinator necessarily.
Mhm.
It, in and of itself, brings incredible value in terms of learning and integrating motivational interviewing and the principles of nonviolent communication. We work on some anti-racism
Mm.
work in there and disrupting power dynamics. All of that is covered in that 6 week course. And then for people who have a goal of being a mental health coordinator and being certified by us, after completion of those prerequisites, they can apply to the certification program, which we run very similarly to the way the intimacy world goes, because that's where I come from. And
Yeah.
so it is a 10-week long course that goes into the very specifics of doing the work in a variety of settings. So we have protocols and best practices for working in documentary spaces, for working on Broadway, for working with LGBTQIA plus stories, for working with performers who have lived experience of a variety of intersections. We go through the liabilities of doing this work. And then included in that is direct mentorship from me and our staff for a required minimum of 30 hours of supervised work so
Mhm.
that so that I can sleep at night so that I know that the people that we are releasing out there into the universe, and this is an international training that we
Yes.
do. We have people certified all over the world. That I know that those people are really competent and confident in their skills and the integration of this work into a variety of settings. So that's what the whole thing looks like.
Well, it's seriously music to my ears. I'm very excited to, start this process. And like I said, it is important for me to be trauma informed, especially when I'm working with such heavy, topics along with these amazing trauma survivors. And I only want to continue to evolve, try to make this a standard practice in this entertainment industry. And full props that y'all are doing it. And you are truly doing something that has been needed for so many decades. I can't even begin to think, even just watching old movies or old TV shows, it's just like, oh boy, that would never fly today. But while it may not fly today, there's ways to have the same impact, different language, different everything, right? So I just again thank you from the bottom of my heart for being so open and vulnerable about what needs to change in this industry. And like I said, it was so important for me to have you on this podcast.
Thank you.
Everything that I have learned from you and already from the few team members that I got to meet a couple weeks ago, y'all are doing it. And I'm so excited to just expand my horizons and really learning from professionals that actually mean what they do and doing it for all the right reasons. And yeah, I mean, I want to know, can I help Broadway? Can I help an opera? When I found all of that out, I'm like, whoa, okay. So, Amanda, thank you so much again. So,
Thank you.
as much as, we are having this tough conversation, I do want to end on a little bit of a lighter note. So, I'm going to ask you a few questions. But the first one is, what's the most interesting thing you've read, watched, or listened to lately?
Oh my gosh. As a person with ADHD, when I'm asked a question to name one specific thing, the brain goes, I've never
Blank.
consumed a single piece of anything that's ever been interesting ever in the
Same.
history of anything. I will share that in preparation for chatting with you today, I have been consuming quite a bit of the podcast, and that has been so lovely and informative in a variety of ways. And so I'm very grateful for the content that you're putting out there into the world. So that's what comes to mind for me right now as we're sitting here together.
Well, I wasn't expecting that. Well, thank you so much. I mean, as most people know, this little project was merely a little project, and it is opening so many doors, so many new conversations, and that really means a lot to me. Thank you so much for saying that. Now, I love highlighting local businesses, especially small businesses. And I feel like, especially right now, would be really important to highlight, any LGBTQIA or BIPOC, restaurants, stores, what have you.
I am located in Colorado,
Mhm.
and I live in a town in Colorado that is, I'm pretty sure, 98% white. Um,
Wow.
which, yes, it's a really weird place to live right now, and is not always
Yeah.
super comfortable.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Cybertrucks in this town. Like,
I,
mhm.
yeah, interesting.
Yeah, we can infer from that whatever you want to infer from that.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Um, and so what I have actually been doing lately is I've been trying to order via the internet directly through manufacturers instead
Mm.
of going to a large store to buy pretty
Yeah.
much anything. I've been
Wow.
looking at so for example, we used to have the Amazon subscribe and save because pretty much
Mhm.
everybody used to have that. I
Mhm.
did research and found that some of those things were actually cheaper to buy directly from the manufacturers themselves on their websites versus buying through
Wow.
the subscribe and save thing. So that's something that I have been doing lately. A specific product that's coming to mind right now that I've actually always purchased directly from the manufacturer is trans tape. So anyone who requires tape for binding or for adhering garments to the body, whether you're an intimacy professional or just a human who
Yeah.
uses those things. I love trans tape so much. It is waterproof and it can last multiple days on the skin. They also
Wow.
provide special sensitive skin oil to help with removal. And then they even have a little balm that they put in a little chapsticky thing. So it's really
Wow.
easy to like soothe the skin. So that is one business that I've been ordering direct from since they started years ago,
Wow.
because they have a variety of skin tones and a variety of sizes of the tape. And so I stock my intimacy kit with oodles of trans tape.
Wow. That's incredible. Thank you so much for highlighting that. And I'll definitely put their information on there on your episode as well. Thank you. So, last question for you. Who is a hero of yours and why?
Oh my God. Why are we asking all the hard questions for someone with a brain like mine?
I'm
To
right there with
give full consent, you could have sent me an email with these questions in advance.
you. Touche. Touche.
Hmm. Um, oh my gosh. The one that comes to mind right now, because I just taught a unit on his concepts. Resma Menikin, who wrote My Grandmother's Hands,
Mhm.
is a somatic abolitionist and is doing incredible work on dismantling racism and raising awareness of the embodiment of racism and
Mhm.
dismantling that on a very individual level, sort of empowering the individual with practices to assess and address those things in ourselves. And this, My Grandmother's Hands, is not a new text, but I still teach with it,
Mhm.
because it is still so very relevant and applicable to the work that I do, whether we're talking about being a therapist or working on set or working in theatrical spaces or working in academic spaces. So shout out to Resma Menikin, because I think
Wow.
he's brilliant and doing some really good stuff.
Mm, beautiful answer. Thank you. And I will be sure to put a picture of the book up as well so that people can find it easily and try to order that locally through your local,
Yeah,
bookstores.
part of why I use that as a resource though is that the at least the audio book, the last time I checked, the audio book was available for free on Hoopla, and both the ebook and the audio book were available for free on Libby. Again, your
Wow.
access may vary based on
Yep.
your library stuff.
Yep.
But the last time I checked, at least here, and part of why I recommend that text is it is really readily available for free.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's incredible. Amanda, I feel like we barely scratched the surface in terms of, where our first conversation went. But I think I would love to have you back, and as this evolves, especially to hear updates, about what's going on with the association, and keeping this as a reminder, because as more industry people listen to this podcast, I think it's very important that we start opening this conversation because I wish I would have known something like this existed so many years ago. And I'm so excited that I know today and that I get to be, you know, taught by you and the so many other people at the association that are already just making such an impactful wave in terms of entertainment. So again, from the bottom of my heart and among trauma survivors everywhere, I say thank you. So thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
doing this.
Thank you. I have so much gratitude for being in community with you and sharing space together.
Likewise.
Just so thank you right back at you.
Thanks, Amanda.
Be sure to join me next week when I sit down with Bill Thomas. Bill is the older brother of Kathy Thomas, one of the first two victims in the unsolved Colonial Parkway murders. In 1986, Kathy and her girlfriend, Rebecca Dowski, were tragically murdered, part of a series of killings that took the lives of 8 young people in and around Williamsburg, Virginia. The case remains unsolved to this day. With over 30 years of experience in the entertainment industry, Bill has worked with artist advocacy organizations such as SAG-AFTRA, the American Federation of Musicians, and the Art Directors Guild. He is currently the host of Mind Over Murder podcast, alongside co-host Kristen Dilley. I'm looking forward to sharing his personal tale with you all next week. This is True Crime in Hollywood, a personal tale. Don't forget to like, share, and leave a review for the show. Thank you so much for listening. And as always, remember the victims and embrace the survivors.